Well, hey everybody, we are back for the second week in a row. Nobody thought it would last, Steve. They all
I
just thought
It was so fast.
it was so fast. Nobody thought this would work, and here we are, twice in a row. Second attempt at a podcast. You should know these are done without a net. These are unrehearsed, and I kind of wish we had theme music. You
Well,
know,
we talked about Lonnie last week, and Lonnie had his own theme song. I don't know if
what
you knew that.
what was his theme song?
It went, "A friend, will you remember me? Think of me, pray for me. When another day is through, I'll still be friends with you." That's a really bad melody part of it, but
I
this
like it. No, I like it. I've often thought that preachers should have walk-on music like fighters do. You know, when
ooh,
fighters come into the ring and they play a song, or a baseball player walks up, what would be your walk-on music if you were preaching this weekend? What would you
oh my
use?
gosh. Yeah, probably he still hasn't found what he's looking for.
I
If you want
like
to get a
that.
secular
I
song,
like, yeah,
because
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
still looking.
Yeah. I think the guitar intro to Sweet Child of Mine by Guns N' Roses, I would use that as walk-on because it's pretty long and you could linger. You could take your time. You could
I
walk.
often think of you in the context of Guns N' Roses.
I thought you probably do.
Yeah, the hair,
Big,
the whole thing.
big fan
So
of guns, big fan of roses. Um, we are going to talk today a little bit about the idea of church planting, church pioneering. I know it's something that's been important to both of us. We talk about it a lot, and
mhm.
Steve has a ton of experience, more so than me. Looking back to the days of the vineyard, roughly, like how many churches came out of the vineyard, would you say?
In Cincinnati, you mean? Of
Yeah,
course.
yeah, planned.
Well, if you count the non-vineyard churches,
Yeah,
I think easily about 12.
about a
And
dozen,
so, yeah,
about a dozen
yeah,
plants, mostly locally there, I think.
right.
And
And
some of them are like just exploding, doing very, very well.
yeah, there was one up in Dayton that several thousand. And there's several that are in the multiple hundreds for sure in
Yeah.
Cincinnati.
Van Cochran, I think in Northwest, I think is
That's
doing
right.
well. So it's
Very
super
well.
cool.
Yes.
Super cool. Back in those days when I was on staff there with you, I remember we had this steady stream of people who wanted help, who would come and
Yeah.
say, "Hey, can you give us input?" I remember doing pastors' conferences with
Mhm.
you and teaching and stuff like that. And I was thinking back, I got a call one time from Donna Hearn. If you remember, Donna was an admin person there, and she said you were not senior pastor anymore. You had moved on, but Dave was a senior pastor. She said there's this church that wants help, and they want to meet with Dave, and Dave's busy, and would you meet with him? I said, yeah, I'll meet with them, whatever. So I said, when are they going to be here? She said, oh no, they're going to be here in a minute. So I go down to the atrium, this big meeting area we all use, and these guys walk in. And the first thing I notice is uh, they're older. Now, I wouldn't say that now because I'm older, but I mean, this is 20 years ago, and these guys are in their 60s. And
Okay. Oh, that's old. Wow.
yeah, it's pretty old. I mean, in the church planter game, that's not young.
Definitely.
And they're wearing really drab brown suits. I remember at my first glance, my first thought was King James only fundamental Baptist. I mean, I honestly thought, okay, that's an interesting choice for them to come to us for help, but it is what it is.
Mhm.
So we sit down and we start talking, and they're very enamored with the vineyard. They love what they see.
Mhm.
And I asked him a little bit about their church, and he said, well, we're Swedenborgians.
Mhm.
And you know how your mind just kind of doesn't da, 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 runs through the data, and the only thing on the file that comes up is the word Swedenborgian and cult. That's all I remember. Couldn't have told you why.
That's right.
I couldn't have told you
Yeah.
where they were a cult, but I just remember, oh my, these guys are a cult. And I mean, the truth of it is they really are. They're founded, I don't
Yeah.
know, in the 1700s, and they're kind of
Mhm.
Christian Scientist-esque, is a little
Yeah,
bit,
that's right.
and with a little universalist twist. They believe in Jesus, but they think if you're sincere, no matter what you believe, you really are believing in Jesus as well. And so everybody's home free. So as I'm sitting there, I'm thinking, I don't want to help these guys. Like this is not the kingdom we're here to build. And so
Mhm.
I've got to find a kind way to say, welcome to our church, have our coffee. I'm not going to help you. And so I'm kind of
Right.
talking my way out of expanding this cult. And Donna comes down the stairs, and I'm in such a pickle talking to these guys, and I'm
Mhm.
thinking Donna has got to meet these guys because later I'm going to tell her what she's got me into. So I call her over, And she comes over, and you remember Donna. Donna is not a big person.
Right.
Donna's pretty petite,
No, you're right. She's small.
and I'm too smart to guess how old people are, but I think she's a little older than I am. And so we're introducing them. I'm like, Donna, these are the friends you invited to meet with me. They're Swedenborgians. And I could tell she went deer in the headlights. She didn't know what Swedenborgians were. She knew I was telling her something is going wrong, but she didn't
A
know that.
Danish Borgian she knew all about, but not
Probably.
Swedenborg.
Right, right.
Okay,
Not
right.
Swedenborgians. And so these two guys look at her. Now, again, I reiterate, Donna is small. For those who don't know her, she's slender. She's just kind
Yeah.
of tiny. She's wearing this white gauzy blouse that's just kind of billowy. She kind of looks
Mhm.
like a Bethel worship leader, and
Okay.
and this is before there was Bethel. So, but she was a leader even then. And one of them looks at her, and he says, "When are you due?" And I just remember thinking, "Oh, buddy, she was not due." Her kids were grown at this point. She wasn't having any more, and there was no logical reason for any man to ever say that to her.
Okay, that's
And
awkward.
I just kind of reached over and I touched him on his shoulder and I said, "She's not expecting. You need to stop." And he kind of got startled, and she went on. So anyway, I told her later, I said, "I don't believe in karma, but if I did, I think that's what that was. You get me invited to a meeting with cult leaders. They think you're pregnant."
Oh my gosh. If I were her, I think I would have gone with it and said, yeah, I'm only a couple of weeks into it.
How did you know? Yeah. So anyway, we have helped all kinds of people, and we have avoided helping all kinds of people, and they were in that category. But talking church planting, one thing that I kind of differentiate with, and maybe not everybody does, is I think differently about church planting as we know it and pioneering,
Mhm.
or starting from scratch, which is closer to more of what you did
Mhm.
back in the day. It's not to say you had no help, but when you
Right.
came to the vineyard, or when you came to Cincinnati, because there was no vineyard, what do you think you were going to
Mhm.
find, and what was there when you got there?
Well, I was told that the royal we had about 50 people, and I was going 50. That's a fantastic start. We could probably just about take off any time now, kind of thing.
Right.
Get
Yeah.
there. There's actually five people, five of them, and they were all wonderful people, but some were more socially connected or skilled than others, and so it was quite a mishmash of folks, even with the five. And what we really were was what Peter Wagner called a parachute drop,
Yeah.
where you come in with almost no contacts, and each person comes in, your wife, your kids, your little dog on the parachute, and it was really much like that. And for the first 2 years, I was absolutely convinced that nothing was happening, that I'd been completely duped.
Mm.
I could have been somewhere really happening where there's
Yeah.
like seven people, and so just incredibly slow, but it was exactly that. It was a pioneering effort, not a programmatic thing where here's the box, you open it up, here's the money, da da da. And I had three jobs at a time. I worked
Yeah.
in a warehouse, I delivered appliances, and I drove a school bus all at once. And
Wow.
none of those have anything to do with what I was trained to do as a teacher,
Yeah.
and no ministry happening whatsoever. But the funny thing is, Randy, that I look back at that, and two things I realized. One is that I think I'm uniquely wired to do that kind of thing versus a programmatic
Hmm.
approach. Because we tried the programmatic approach later on, and it was not my personality at all. I like the rough and tumble,
When you say
and
you tried that later on, tell me about that, because I don't know
yeah.
that.
Well, we went from Florida down. Oh, I'm sorry, we went from Ohio after we stopped working at the vineyard there down to the Tampa area and planted from scratch. And we had, well, actually, it wasn't from scratch. We had a number of people that wanted to join us, and some moved down there on their own. Some I didn't want them to move down there, and they did anyway. It was kind of like adopting a very needy, gigantic family of about 20 people at that point, and
Mm.
everybody had their own issues. Da 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 da. It was actually far more complicated than coming in as a parachute drop, and
Mm.
yet I think that I can see why a lot of planters really want the predictability, the apparent predictability of a box, open it up and go for it kind of thing. And This is not the way I'm wired.
Yeah.
On the Enneagram, if you're familiar with that, I'm a four wing five, which is what they call it. It's kind of bohemian. They call it. I'm picturing Bible under one hand and guitar over my back, kind of thing. And that sounds ironic to people who know me well because I don't come across that way necessarily. But that's really who I am deep down. And Janie's a fantastic partner. So, we meet people, bring them in, meet more
Yeah.
people, bring them in, on it goes.
And not to say that one way is better than the other, because we've both
Yeah,
seen a lot of people who have planted with an organization and lots of financial backing and all as many advantages as you can muster if you're, building something
hmm,
from scratch. And the Lord has blessed
that's
it and
right.
it's been good, but that's a different thing than doing the
Hmm,
parachute drop. And I think there's advantages and disadvantages to both. Um,
hmm.
Starting from scratch like that, what would you say the advantages were?
Well, the advantages are you get to shape it yourself, and you get to be the guy or the couple, what have you, that bring your values, your practices uniquely. Because if you're part of any kind of a group, Vineyard, Schminyard, Baptist, Schmaptist, whatever, your unique blend is that there's still an absolutely unique application to that where you are. So a Cincinnati version of that would be one thing. A Phoenix version would be another, perhaps.
Mhm.
But the idea from regardless, is I get to massage into the thing these values that I really feel like God is calling us to walk out. And so, honestly, before we got to Cincinnati, I was a little bit of an evangelist, but became that gigantically at that point because we didn't have any people.
Yeah. I think there's also something really unique about that first wave of people that you gather,
Mm-hmm.
because there's something about that draws people that can be both
Mm-hmm.
positive and negative.
Yeah.
And when you start with a crowd, you do
Mm-hmm.
the mailers, you do the mass media, you got 300 people on the first Sunday morning.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there's some disadvantage of that because it's one thing to have five people that have expectations, but then to
Mm-hmm.
have 300 that have expectations, uh,
Yeah.
I'd much rather disappoint five than 300. Um,
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm with and I think the other part, which is the thing that we actually tried to do in Florida was start with 300 people,
mhm.
and we managed to get about 150, I think, on our first Sunday on it was Easter a number of years ago. Or if you're a fan of movies, Easter's, and but you didn't get that one
No,
anyway.
I did
Okay,
get, I got
but
that one. I got that one.
okay. But what we figured out is that it's so unorganic that it felt fake to me. It felt like these people don't know me. They don't know
Yeah.
us. They're coming in because they got a flyer or what have you. But what we want to do is have people that really get it and that really are, entrenched in the same kind of thinking that we have.
Mhm.
And it'll change the city. The thing that I kind of came to figure out is that if you don't start organically, it's not going to be fun. It's
Mhm.
going to be the outside trying to shape you into something versus an organic inner explosion or inner growth out of the heart of God that God gave you the vision for.
Mhm.
So without a vision from God, it's going to be very difficult to make it work and make it zing and make it full of life. Because that's ultimately what God calls us to do is express His unique expression of that in that city.
And I think that with the instant crowd, and again, there are great churches that have been started this way. I don't mean to sound negative about it, but I look at it and the challenge that I see is that
Mm-hmm.
one of the great formers of community is common adversity. Like if
That's right, man.
together we have the same struggle, okay, back to back, we're going to fight this battle together. And when the battle
Mm-hmm.
subsides, man, you've got a friend. As
Yeah.
opposed to fill the crowd, these people. Now you can mitigate that with quick formation of small groups, and you can get around it. But it's a challenge you don't have is if they come as consumers, they stay as
Mm-hmm.
consumers, and you
Mm-hmm.
don't have that common adversity that glues people together. Um,
That's right.
I also remember sitting with you in Starbucks in Tri-County Mall. First time we've ever, no, not the first time met, second time we met. I think we talked last week about you praying for me under the auditorium. But
Mm-hmm.
about a year later, Chris Beard from there in Cincinnati arranged you and I connecting. And we met on the night when we were having our first like gathering meeting. It was the first time that
Hmm.
we were going to have anybody together, and I was so excited. And I told you we've got these great people, and we're going to meet the first time. Do you remember what your response was to me?
No,
Quote,
I'm afraid
quote,
to ask.
quote. Now, keep in mind, I'm as intimidated as I'll get out to meet you. Like I'm just like petrified. And but it's an
Oh,
exciting day, and I'm telling you all about this. And you look at me, and the first thing you say is, "Don't get too attached to them. They'll be gone in 2 years."
yeah.
And you missed it by 2 weeks. I think you're a false prophet because you were right, and that doesn't make those people bad. But
Hmm.
you used the analogy of scaffolding at the time. I don't know if
That's
you
right.
remember talking about that, but like, how
Mhm.
would you describe that?
Well, when you build a facility, a building, what have you, you have to put scaffolding up before you can assemble it properly. Otherwise, it's complete chaos. And so you have these. We've all seen it before on a redone building or a new building. They put up these little bars and so forth and so on, and you climb around and you get it built. And some people are really uniquely called and wired and enthusiastic about being scaffolding.
Hmm.
And other people, they are very much the opposite. And in fact, when you start a new church, you will always have a large percentage that are scaffolding that will not be around for a long time because their joy is undoing the chairs, unfolding them, and setting up sound equipment, and on it goes. But those who are long-term wired will be the ones that will grow bored with maintenance, any kind of maintenance mentality. So,
Yeah,
uh, and what happens when the building is done? The scaffolding comes down,
yeah,
and so you don't need it any longer. Not that we don't value those people, but I could look back now at numbers of people that were fantastic at scaffolding, and they left us. And the one thing that I really did well, I think, at that point was I said, go start a church with a few other people.
hmm
And they did, and they were kind of surprised I would respond that way because they
hmm
thought that I would see them as competition. And there is a part of me that that goes that direction a little bit anyway. And what we figured out is that if we just let them go and be themselves and maybe group together with other dissatisfied people, they can start a new church. That's how we got a lot of those going.
yeah,
And they're still going 20 years later, 30 years later.
yeah.
Yeah.
But it is good to prepare your heart for that in advance.
Oh boy. Oh boy. Yeah. Because
To
otherwise you feel like you're a reject. What's
right,
wrong with me? How did I, my second grade teacher was correct about my verbal ability. That kind of goes back on you after a
yeah,
while.
yeah. It's we are in a phase of a young church, and right now,
Mhm.
which I didn't anticipate being at 56. I didn't think that was going to be what I was doing, and I'm enjoying it.
Mhm.
I'm loving it, but it is a bit of a sandwich I did not order.
Yeah.
Um,
Mhm.
and even at this age with this experience in ministry, I have to discipline
Mhm.
myself to remain tender to people and remind myself, okay, they're not my people.
Mhm.
They're really not my people.
Right.
And even the most
Absolutely.
enthusiastic ones
That's
who say,
incredibly important.
even the ones who are enthusiastic about being your people are really not your people. And
Yeah.
if you think of them as your people, you're setting yourself up for a lot of heartache. You're not thinking about them in the
That's
way the
right.
Lord would have you think about them. And you end up starting to
Right.
leverage them because they're useful rather than serve them because the Lord put them in front of you. And I think that's been
Boy, that's
accentuated in post COVID.
mhm.
I made a joke Sunday um, that I know it's hard to imagine. Made a joke Sunday about I preached kind of an extension of a sermon that I preached 2 weeks ago. I said it's a remix, it's not part two, but I'm not rehashing the same thing. I said,
Mhm.
although post COVID, you could preach the same message twice in a row and only a few people would know it. And it's true because post COVID, it's like standing on a train depot preaching at a train that goes by.
Yeah,
You don't know who's going to be
that's
on the
right.
car, and they would all say they're with you, and,
Yeah.
and they
Yeah.
mean it, and in their heart they are. But that train is moving pretty fast, and you have to adjust your heart.
I'm meeting with Carl George a little later today. Most people don't know his name that are watching, perhaps, but he was a major voice out of Fuller Seminary, Fuller Church Growth Institute for years
Mhm.
and years. And he's getting together with a few of us today on Zoom, and that's exactly the issue we're going to ask him about: is where
Mhm.
do you go from here with the medium-sized church, especially because
Mhm.
it's small churches seem like they're having an easier time. mega churches, no problem usually. But the medium, what do you do with those guys?
Yeah.
How do you keep going on and not being depressed because people are not sticking with you, you know?
Yeah.
So
Um,
the way you do it, I think, is outreach.
yeah.
So go ahead.
Going back to those early days, you've got your five, yay, maybe seven people on a good small group night, but things start taking off, and it started slow for you. Like,
Yeah.
took you a little while to get to that 150 point, didn't it?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. It took years. I spent 2 years just I call it now serving time in Cincinnati, kind of like you're in jail, because it was unusually bad weather for like 2 years. This sounds like a hard to believe, but
It's
it
just
was. I mean, everything
a
was not
2 year
against
string
us.
of bad weather.
Exactly. Only in Ohio would that be possible. And but I what we just hung in there. I think a lot of us do with grit and saying I'm not going to quit because where do I go back to? There's nothing to go back to. I burned the boats, and on it goes. And so what we did is I kept just saying we're going to keep loving and keep serving and see what happens. Well, after 2 years, I am in a bus parking lot at the before the crack of dawn, 5:45 in the morning. I'm doing a complaining episode with God. What in the world's going on? Gah, 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 gah. And I clear as a bell, Randy. I get this inner thought that the problem is that you are boring, Steve. But and then I get this instant, response back. But what Jesus did is not boring.
Mm,
And so that became an ongoing conversation. And what I was complaining is there's no people, there's no momentum. I came from LA where on our first Sunday had 100 people, and
mhm.
after 2 years had about 2,000. And being there with Bob Dylan didn't hurt anything, by the way. But we couldn't get him to move to Cincinnati, so we were stuck.
Yeah.
But we ended up. God says, if you will do the simple things, if you'll start washing the feet of Cincinnati,
Mhm,
loving Cincinnati, no donate, no strings attached, then your problem will be what to do with all the people.
mhm,
And I got to tell you, 10 years later, not to the exact day, but pretty close. 10 years later, we had 4,000 people,
mhm.
and we were running 7 services on a weekend at a facility we bought later. But incredibly to me, um, it was a story of endurance, really, more than anything else. Just
Yeah.
hanging in there, and I am not built to endure. I'm not sure any of us are really, but just hanging in there and keep on doing the next thing God gives you to do. Wimber called it our marching orders, and I got that day a download from on high of marching orders: love, serve, wash the feet, lose money.
Mhm.
What about gaining money, Lord? Well, I thought we were here to grow this thing. Oh, no, no. By giving it away and losing, in
Mhm.
quotes, you win and you begin to walk out the kingdom.
Yeah.
So it was really an episode of that. And it took about like 2 years to even get started,
Yeah.
Randy. And it was amazing.
Everybody who plants that I talk to
Mm-hmm.
talks about the unawareness they have of the skill they need to develop to endure pain.
Mm-hmm.
That
Mm-hmm.
and there's no trick to it. There's
Yeah.
not one, two, three. There's no seminar, but there is a ton of pain. There's a ton of what feels like rejection
Mm-hmm.
and
Oh,
this
boy.
constant onslaught. And especially in our current world, where you can flip through your phone and see, all your buddies' churches all over the world that are,
Yeah.
now I realize everything looks cooler on the internet, but they've got more people in that Instagram picture than you had in your whole crowd. And it's true. I mean, it's funny, but it's true. And
It's Photoshop.
it's Photoshop. Hey, those people were in that other guy's church too. That's a stock photo. No, there there is endurance. It isn't about being the best preacher. It isn't about being the best motivator. It's honestly
Mhm.
just being the guy who hangs on longest and the last man standing wins.
I'm not going to quit. I can do many things, but quitting is not one of the options.
Yeah.
And I'm going to keep on showing up and keep on. And my wife may get mad and not show up all the time, or vice versa. And yet I'm going to keep on. I'm going to get back on the horse and keep doing it, man.
That's another common thing I've
There ought,
talked
there,
in
there
almost
ought to
every.
be a seminar, Randy. A church paying for church planters. That'd
Yeah.
be an idea. I don't know if it would work or not, but it wouldn't be real popular probably. But enduring pain.
Almost every church planter I've talked to has also told me that at some point their wife has looked at him and said, "I don't want to go to this church." Well, you kind of have to.
Oh
It's
man.
just it's that hard. People who haven't done it do not understand. Uh,
Yeah.
but they do. What is aside from the ability to endure pain, which
Mm.
could also make us a slug? What are some other characteristics you've seen in planters or pioneers over the years that you
Mm.
go, yeah, that's super helpful?
I think that people who are willing to expand their borders and their skill
Mm,
sets. For example, one thing that I did out of more need is learning to play guitar and leading basic worship anyway, knowing a few songs.
mhm.
The thing most people that don't play guitars don't know is there's only about four chords you need to know to
Yeah.
play. Like Gordon Lightfoot, they call him four chord Gordon Lightfoot, because that's all he does in all of his big hits, four chords. And I think that if you can do that, and believe me, you can spend about 2 hours learning the chords, maybe 15 minutes, depending on your capacity, and you can play guitar.
Yeah.
And for example, being willing to stretch out that way. Here's another one, Randy, is willing to do what it takes to become effective, no matter how uh, embarrassing even that might be. In my
Mhm.
case, I had some phonics issues. They weren't. That's probably not the right word. Some other issues with some when I was speaking 7 times, it became apparent after about the fifth service that my speaking was getting a little tired, etc. Without going into detail, I took speaking elocutions lessons, I guess, from a
Electrocution
uh,
lessons? My goodness.
electrocutions. That's right.
Yes.
I came back to life, but they taught me how to do it properly, how to speak
Hmm.
properly, and it was way less energy. I was able to do 7+ services even at that point. But I sat in a little chair because it wasn't really designed for adults. And I
Hmm.
and I paid for it out of my own pocket. On it goes, but it was revolutionary. I ended up getting braces actually in the end. Had 4 teeth pulled. It was very complicated, but it
Wow.
was so worth it. It was so worth it.
Yeah.
You know.
There is an element of if you're the lead guy, you have to present like you know what you're doing, you know it all. And
Oh
nobody
boy.
falls for it.
Yeah.
Like nobody really thinks that's
Yeah.
true because they see,
Yeah.
but there's that bit of vulnerability of going, I got to develop in this area, or I have to
Yeah.
have a better understanding of this. And
That's
it's not
right.
easy. It's not easy.
No.
Well, tell me a little bit about what is the personality type of a parishioner, for lack of a better phrase, who is drawn to this, good and bad? Because there's both. Like, what kind of people
Mm-hmm.
go, I want to be a part of that? Or if they've been a part of a conventional established church and now they're in that setting, what do they need to know that
Yeah.
why is it different?
Yeah, yeah, the at the one extreme there are some depending again on the church. Vineyard is identifies as we believe in the gifts of spirit, the power of the spirit, prophetic stuff is valid today. Those kinds that really attract to that end of things would be one whole capacity. At the other end of the people that I call in Cincinnati anyway, the penny loafer crowd with
Hmm.
the perfectly pleated wife with her dress,
Yeah,
perfectly
yeah,
pleated dress.
right.
What ends up is that there's stories on both, and what I figured out is that both are hungry for God.
Mm,
Both want to know God in a more profound way. That's why they're here, and they want to be accepted. Hopefully, I think that's part of it too. They don't maybe have words for all that, but at the conservative end of things, there's a tendency to be an advice giver, which I find
mm,
a little bit difficult to tolerate because you end up getting advice from people sometimes that aren't really they've not been there, done that, and I appreciate it. But
mhm.
anyway, they're over here at this end conservative. The other end is the crazies, and we've had so many stories, Randy, that we're looking for God, but expressing that in some odd ways. The lady who felt that God said baptize the entire 1 o'clock p.m. service in Evian. And she had the Evian. She opened the lid, and as we're singing and worshiping songs, da da da, worship songs, she gets up and starts running around the entire auditorium. And to get out and get the whole group, she had to run out into the entryway for a little bit to get into
To
the
make
other
it back
door
around
to
into
go
the other
around one
room.
more. 3 times, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. She sprinkles water on people. She's
And
running.
the ushers, where are the ushers at?
They're opening the door for her.
That's
I mean,
awesome.
I'm sitting there going, I have about 18 things wrong with this, but the main thing is the ushers opening the doors for us.
One
They,
lap of the
what?
auditorium is understandable. It's the second and third one that are hard to understand.
Yeah, and yeah, oh my, and the smiles, oh, please come on right through.
You know that
Oh my,
comment you made about the advice givers. Um,
yeah.
it's crazy to be in a vocation where
Hmm.
almost everyone knows how to do what you should be doing. Like, and
Yeah,
they're happy to tell you.
yeah.
And they have no idea, and they really do mean well. I had
Yeah.
a friend who was an
They
attorney.
mean well.
Yeah, no, he's an
Yeah.
attorney. He was a very successful attorney, and
Mhm.
he and his partner were believers. And he said at one point, he said, "Yeah, my partner and I, we've thought about starting a church. Just like
Oh, okay.
and
Why not?
because I couldn't stop myself, I said, that's fascinating. I said, because the youth pastor and I were talking about opening a law firm. It's this
I
idea
love
that
their idea.
we mean well, surely how hard could it be? I've watched a little television, and but nobody gets as much advice as pastors on how to do their job.
Well, that's brilliant. I'm going to use that one in the future. Next time somebody tells me something like that. What do you do? Oh, I'm a mechanic. That's exactly what I was thinking of
I
starting with
was thinking
Randy. He's
about
doing
doing
that
that.
at McKinsey.
Right, right. We're
Yeah,
going to do
yeah.
it. Well, one last thing I want to talk about, and a lot of these questions actually come from discussions we've had over the years and things that you've said that
Mm,
that I've just pondered and watched them unfold. Um,
mm.
Somebody asked me one time, "What's it like hanging out with Steve?" And I said, "He talks, I write things down, I figure it out later," and that's largely been it. And although when you said this I got instantly.
Mm,
We were in Cincinnati, and we were
mm,
at Homerama, which is a big like home show. And
mm.
our wives are walking through the houses, and we've already seen enough houses that we can't afford, so we decided to just sit on a bench. And
Right.
you made a comment about um, uh, the local church's affiliation to a larger group. Whether it's a
Mm,
denomination or some, there are denominations that say, no, we're a fellowship, but we're really a denomination. What's the difference? Who cares? And you
mm.
talked about politely keeping those things a little bit at arm's length. Not that you're not a part of it, but
Yeah.
I think the actual phrase you said is whatever group you're a part of, do the minimum you have to do to be a part of that group
Mm.
because the people you're ministering to don't care.
That's right. Yeah.
How did you come to
Yeah.
that? Did you always think about things that way? Because that's affected me. Like, if you were wrong about that, you've lost me up for about 25 years because I have held that very, very close, and I've infuriated a lot of people who wanted me to be a part of
Yeah.
the big thing, and I just didn't want to be a part of the big thing. What are your
Yeah.
thoughts on
I say it slightly differently about being the minimal. I would say be low, whatever the version is, low Methodist, low Vineyard. And in fact, John Wimber was the one who coined the phrase that I've used many times, Vineyard Schminyard. And then he went on to say Baptist, Baptist, Lutheran, Schmutheran, and so forth. It's not about the group. Very few people, the ones that are life-giving that you really want to have a bunch of, they could care less about it being a part of that group.
that?
Or if they came initially, that was the curiosity, but that isn't what kept them.
Mhm.
Is that? And I've seen time and again where what we've felt called to do was in conflict, slightly anyway, because when you're doing what would be the right word, I guess, iconoclastic things, where you're taking the lens and blowing it apart, it makes people mad. It makes some people very glad. It makes some people scratch their heads and go, "What was that all about? I don't know
Yeah,
why we have to be different." Well, you're just being who you are. You're just
yeah,
being, expressing that unique Vineyard, Schminyard, Baptist, Baptist in that local context. And you may not even look like all the other churches of your group, all grouped together. You're enough that you fit,
mhm,
but you don't have to be the ultimate expression of that, whatever it is.
yeah.
And so, yeah,
And you did a ton of outreach there. Did the people you were reaching care that much of your church affiliation?
no. In fact, they were skeptical for the longest time, and I got point blank asked, "Is this a cult?" And because
Like,
we, in
no,
the
those are
first
the
few years,
Swedenborgians. They're over there.
yeah, yeah, they're down the street. They got the brown suits, and
Yeah.
they're asking about people that are pregnant. But what we had to do was establish credibility. There's a movie called Saint Vincent with Bill Murray, blah blah blah. He is a good-hearted guy, goes in to take all of his money out of the bank and to give it to a great cause, blah blah blah. And as he hears he only has $250 in the account, he puts his head against the window and he goes, "Oh, well, I'll take it all at once." She goes, "No, no, you don't understand. You know, you owe us 250. You're in the red, not the black." What? And he goes, "Well, here," she goes, "It's like this. Here's you. This is zero. Here's you. You're down here." And I think a lot of people relate to that very simple thought is that we have no credibility. We haven't made deposits in the community.
Mm.
We haven't gone out and done anything to identify ourselves. In fact, we're either non-existent or fully camouflaged. And so we've got to get out there and love until they ask us why we're loving them, to serve them till they ask why we are serving them. On it goes.
Yeah. And you were never ashamed of being a vineyard. It was part of the name of the church, but
Correct.
it wasn't the forefront, the calling card.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
And yeah, in fact, people would often get it wrong, and I always found that funny. They would say something about grapes or
Grapes.
something about, yeah, some agricultural word. I don't remember what it was exactly. And to me, that's funny. That's not a failure. That's a funny thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Tell us a little bit about the Waffle House story you were telling me earlier about, and if those people even cared.
Yeah, they could care less. What happens is that every Christmas Eve for years, I don't know if they're still doing it in Cincinnati, but we would give away donuts on the way out the door after the Christmas Eve service. We had multiples of those too. So whatever one you came to, you got fresh, hot, Krispy Kreme donuts with the map on top of it, encouraging you to go somewhere where people had to work on Christmas Eve.
Mhm.
Because there's a lot of people that they can't be with family. On it goes. They're firemen, policemen, they're restaurants. On it goes. And so we had these maps. One crew went off the reservation, so to speak. They were going to their whatever it was, their allotted location. There's a half a dozen people in a van. Hey, let's do this. Let's go to Waffle House. This is before the famous Waffle House chair throwings that have been in the news lately.
Right, right.
And so they go in and just say, we're going to go serve them. We're going to give them the donuts and then serve all the employees. One guy goes back and says, "I'm going to wash dishes." The dishwasher guy goes, "What?" And
Just
he
took
says,
over.
"Take a break." Yeah, he's out there smoking in the parking lot, the dishwasher guy. Then other people start clearing tables. They start asking, what can we do for you that would show you a little bit of practical love? And they said, "Well, you could do this, empty the trash." They did that. Well, a couple of people said, "Let's put money into let's spiff up the atmosphere here," because people are by themselves on Christmas Eve
Right.
at Waffle House. There couldn't be more of an ironic, oh my gosh. They're eating with one hand like this, and
Yeah.
and so they put in a number of dollar bills, and they start playing songs from Motown.
Hmm.
And if you know anything about music, Motown music is anything but down and depressed, and on it goes. It's more, I'm going to get out of my mess kind of thing.
Hmm.
Well, they start pulling people out as they dance around. Come on, you got to dance with us. And without hesitation, all the people said in the tables, I can't dance. I'm too depressed. Come on, you can dance for 5 minutes with me anyway. Pulls them up, and people driving by have to see. They're all dancing at the Waffle House. What is this all about? Well, anyway, I hear about it later on. They end up leaving when it's all done. It's a fantastic time. About 2-3 weeks later, I get a call. There's a psychiatrist on the phone wants to talk to you. And I go, "Is it Dr. So-and-so? Because he's my psychiatrist." "No, it's somebody else." Anyway, I pick up the phone. "Hello, is this Pastor Steve?" And I said, "Yeah." And he says, "This is Dr. So-and-so. I just need to tell you, two of my patients were at the Waffle House that night. They didn't know each other. They still didn't know each other, but they both were on heavy doses of antidepressant meds, especially at Christmas, because they have so many rejection memories in their heads. And I've seen both of them now since then, and they're so much better. And they both pointed to this. What's so different about this Christmas? They made me dance at the Waffle House.
Wow.
They made me dance. And so I said, I thought he was going to reprimand me for making
Right.
him dance incorrectly or something. And the guy says, "No, I was calling to thank you because I've lowered their medication levels, and
Wow.
this is the first time I've done that actually." And Thank you, thank you, thank you. And that's the first time I got a call from a psychiatrist where he thanked me.
Yeah.
and and yet I think that is part of the story, is be willing to go off the reservation, be
Yeah.
willing to do what you're all about, maybe be misunderstood, even by your own group.
Yeah.
And I got to tell you, even within Vineyard world, I was criticized roundly often by other Vineyard pastors mostly. And yet the depressed people at Waffle House, they couldn't be more
They
excited.
were big fans.
And those are my people.
Yeah.
Those are my people. Waffle House. Not the pastors. Those are not my people. These are my people.
Yeah. No, I
And it's
totally
like the old prophecy.
get that.
It's like the old prophecy you've heard in a Pentecostal church. These, my people, I call you my people because you are my people. If you're not my people, I wouldn't call you my people. Because you're my people, I call you my people. These
That
are
whole
my
thing was
people.
about
These guys
Waffle
at
House.
Waffle House.
I had no idea. It all makes so much more sense now. Um,
Absolutely. It's the truth.
the, talking about the random prophecy, you remember Clyde Miller. Clyde pastored in
Yes.
Cincinnati. Clyde knew everyone in Cincinnati. If he had asked you to lunch,
Oh.
realize this was an all day event because you just couldn't get through a restaurant without everybody talking to Clyde. Everybody loved Clyde, and Clyde
Oh.
was a
Oh.
denominational official for a while,
Uh-huh.
and he was the guy that kind of inherited every mess. He'd have to go clean up the mess. And
Mhm.
so he heard there was a church in Northeast Ohio that was about ready to split, and it was ready to split over how they were observing Christmas. Um, you know,
What?
you had the hardcore, Santa Claus crowd, and then you had the hardcore, the Christmas tree is a satanic symbol. I mean, we every year it's the same thing. So anyway, they're about to split, and
Saturnalia treat. Yeah.
right, right.
Heard all that.
So
Yeah.
Clyde goes to, and they were supposed to have a business meeting after the service. And so he's in
Mhm.
the service, and tensions are high. Like we're singing this, they're singing the songs, but it's tensions are high. And so somebody stands up and has a prophetic word, and their word is, "Thus saith the Lord, lay off Santa Claus. He's a good man. He does a good work." I've
Oh my gosh.
I've always remembered that. Lay off Santa Claus. He's a good man. He does a good work.
Oh, he said, "Good. Thus saith the Lord, lay off Santa
That's a pretty high endorsement. I mean, it's got the "Thus saith the Lord" on it. Well, anyway, hey, it's
Claus."
been good to just chat about these things that are so important to us, and two people specifically, I think, who often are hurting and are often struggling, and probably need a good story and a
Mm,
good laugh as much as they need anything else that we've been able to give them.
absolutely.
But before we jump off, could you pray for those church planters or people who have stumbled into a church plant and found themselves
Mhm.
there and realizing this is hard?
Yeah,
And
it is.
if you would just
Yeah.
pray for them, and we'll call it a day.
Yeah. Oh boy. Come, Holy Spirit. Come, Holy Spirit. Rest upon each of us, in particular, those that are planting, those that are aspiring to plant. I pray power. I pray courage.
Hmm.
I pray an enduring spirit. I pray an enduring spirit by the power of God's presence Himself to be with you, to be upon you, and to move through you. And I pray specifically that you would not plant a church as much as you would change a city.
Mm.
In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.